Very good evening to all of you. It's a pleasure to have you join us today for the unveil of the white paper Decoding Consumer Behavior and Winning the 2021 Festive Season. I'm MONEKA KHURANA, MMA India Country Head, and your host and moderator for today. So, MMA has partnered with GroupM and Amazon Advertising to co-author an industry white paper offering a collective view on how the industry can win this festive season with effective marketing approaches. This white paper is aimed at helping marketers prepare for the upcoming festive season. It will cover insights around expected consumer sentiment, which is based on a consumer study, the role of digital in the consumer journey, which again emanates from the consumer study and a marketer study conducted. It also comprises key challenges which marketers face, along with recommended approaches to establish optimal visibility and drive performance. So, the key takeaways for all of you would be to seek direction on how the upcoming festive season can be best leveraged, which in the current context becomes super crucial to be able to meet business outcomes and cover up for a truly disappointing first half. But before we dive into the webinar, let me share a little about MMA with you. So MMA's mission, for those who aren't familiar with MMA, is to enable marketers to drive innovations, enduring business value, stronger consumer engagement in an increasing and dynamic and mobile connected world. We are a not-for-profit trade body, and we believe the uniqueness about MMA is to be able to bring the ecosystem together and work in a collaborative manner. The way we do this is we enable ongoing education through reports, white papers, and training programs. We conduct immense amount of research, including impact studies. We set standards and guidelines on an ongoing basis, and we inspire the industry through platforms like Smarties and several use cases. We are an 800 plus strong member network globally and an absolutely growing chapter in India. Our programs are designed to drive learning, assessments, networking, research, and capability building as benefits to our members and to the industry at large. We're proud to share with you our growing AMP community, an acronym for Accelerating Modern Marketing Practices. The councils represent the ecosystem true to the philosophy MMA believes in. And we drive education, thought leadership, and build standards for the task forces. May I request somebody to go on mute, please? Chirag, can I have you on mute, please? Yeah. Chirag.
MONEKA, you're on mute.
Yeah. Okay, am I audible?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so like we were discussing, so accelerating modern marketing programs is conducted by the AMP community on an ongoing basis, and we enable education, thought leadership, and build standards for various verticals like MarTech, e-commerce, voice, brand safety, among several others. So the white paper today is aimed at helping marketers to prepare for the upcoming season. And as mentioned, it will cover sentiment, consumer sentiment from the study, marketer challenges from the marketer study, and several recommended strategies for marketers, for which I'm going to invite TUSHAR VYAS, President South Asia, GroupM, to walk us through some of the key highlights from the report and share the key takeaways from it. So over to you, TUSHAR, and welcome aboard again.
Thanks, MONEKA. Just give me a 10-second to pull this report. Let me know once my screen is visible. Is it good to go?
Yes, TUSHAR, we're good.
Great, thanks, MONEKA. And what I'm going to do in next few minutes is run through some of the data point. And this is a pretty interesting and a rich data got collected through two sources. One is the sort of survey which is got conducted across 3,000 odd consumer, And in parallel, basically, with the help of MMA, we reached out to almost 120 odd marketing folks and got their feedback. So it's a culmination of these two data sources, what you're going to see in next 5 minutes. And of course, I urge you to download the report and go through in a more detail the full finding. So if you look at overall sort of sentiment remains fairly positive, and among the basically entire consumer fraternity, and they are looking at a positive change which they are going to drive in a festival season. So if you look at more than 2/3 are looking at same or higher, and with 45% looking at a higher spend compared to last year. So there is a going to be a one can say a relatively bumper festival season, and the focus area remains some of the lifestyle spends and related areas. If you look at what they're looking within the spend, basically gifting, celebration, and lifestyle tops. And if you look at top categories, again, mobile and accessories, followed by fashion and electronics comes in the top 3 categories. And interesting to see basically the category in the lifestyle upward of 40%. So lifestyle, celebration, and different upward of 40%. So it's a very strong number and a strong interest which we are seeing here. When we look at sort of product and brand choices, again, 60% of what of people are still in the process. And if you look at the sort of decision cycle, so anywhere between 1 month to 3 month kind of cycle, which we are looking at in terms of pre-festival season. So that there are 60% of people still to decide in terms of either which category, or if they have decided category, then within the brand. And one of the data point I would like to highlight is intended audience or in-market audience kind of category. So almost 35% of people have decided category. They know what they're going to buy, but which brand they are going to buy is not yet decided, right? So they are in a process of building a consideration set, and that's a pretty interesting segment when 1/3 of consumers are in market. They are sure they are going to purchase, but they haven't decided the brand. Role of digital, if you want move to, so almost 80% of consumer journey, they are saying online is going to be integral part of their journey. And if you look at basically within that, the shopping and platforms are a key part, and then followed by online search. Right? So there are sort of component of online which is going to play very critical role in building this consideration while they are researching an online environment. And the second piece is, even if they are going to purchase in offline environment, digital has a very strong role to play, especially what industry calls as a research online purchase on offline kind of category, right? So there is enough touch point, enough sort of discovery or comparison going to happen within the digital environment before they go and transact in a store or in an online mode. When it comes to sort of marketer, again, this kind of bullishness is sort of continues. Brand marketers are looking at spending higher this festival season. So again, that number is 55%. More marketers are going to spend this year. And if you look at same or higher, then it's 80% is the number. Right? And if you look at what's the objective for this category, again, it's a more outcome-driven focus, what you are seeing this time. So it's either sales, product launch, or lead generation. So you see more and more outcome lead sort of focus in terms of driving transaction, driving business. Digital being an integral part, so high on radar. And again, this is in sync with how the consumer behavior has evolved and changed, especially in the last 18 months. Again, changing digital spend on a positive side. So 3/4 of them are saying they're going to spend more. And once there's no brainer, almost 95% if you consider same and higher. So there is a clear momentum there. And if you look at preferred platform, it's a mix of a platform like Google, social media like a Facebook, and a sort of commerce platform like Amazon. Right? So you're seeing a spectrum of platform playing a role. And then part of their consideration. There are also sort of OTT, some of the niche areas, as well as the e-grocer and sort of social content site featuring in that list. And again, some of the detail list is available as a part of the report. Now, if you have to sort of understand what's the sort of key challenges, right? So, and it's a 3 buckets. So basically, how do I reach a relevant audiences? How do I break the clutter in a festival season? And how am I going to measure my ROI, right? So I think there is a sort of indication which is coming in all 3 areas in terms of how to navigate within that environment. So how do we sort of reach the right audience, right? And the sort of approach is basically start with the intent and look at some of the micro segment to reach out to those guys. If you have a right sort of touch point, which is in terms of in-market segment, then it's easier to reach out in the window of 2 to 3 months available from now to festival season. And look at the full funnel sort of attribution. So look at sort of starting of a journey to a transaction kind of approach to identify and optimize the journey within that. And there are sort of various signals available at different platform level. And here is one example of a sort of e-com platform, what kind of signals are available. So you can have based on the persona, so in terms of what's their interest, like a tech or a fashion or a sort of fitness. So you can pick up those persona segment based on their consumption, be it in terms of media or a content. That's a sort of second behavior segment which is available. Based on their research, you can look at the in-market segment and overlay finally with some of the affluence demographic on the detail to filter some of these based on where you are distributing product or how you are sort of targeting and fine-tuning. So there are multiple signals available. It can be logically bucketed and create sort of best performing audience and a consumer bucket for your brands out of this. When it comes to sort of visibility also, you can sort of look at various phases. So starting from a now to sort of festival period and within festival, right? So you can depending on the category you are operating on, you can do a build up right now and start creating a visibility. As you move closer, you focus more on the driving conversion and consideration set, right? So it's a various tactics which is possible. And one can look at the mix of tactics within digital touchpoint based on your category and digital maturity at this stage. And finally, the measurement piece. Depending on what's the objective you are driving and where exactly you are pegging your campaign within the funnel, either to drive awareness or driving consideration or driving transaction. You can look at the metrics and combination of metrics and then sort of look at ROI and outcome from that. So just to summarize, basically, overall sentiments are positive at a consumer level, and marketers are also reflecting the same positiveness within the environment. Role of digital has sort of exponentially grown in consumer journey, and again, as part of the mix, what we are seeing. What is clearly coming out is using of a data and intent signal to reach out the audiences. So look at some of the intent and behavioral signal to identify your sort of key consumer. And finally, look at the metrics in terms of whatever the starting point of a campaign, look at those in ROI context, and then create an improvisation cycle, because it's not a plan and implement kind of environment. You just have a starting point and then sort of keep improvising as you reach a closure to festival season. With this, I'm just going to pass it back to Monika, and from there we'll move to the panel discussion.
Sure. Thank you, Tushar. Thank you. This was really helpful, and I do understand you're really under the weather and you've made the effort to be here and share these key takeaways with everybody. Absolutely appreciate it, and thank you for doing this. I do want to let the audience know that the report which Tushar has just walked us through is available, and the link is being shared on the chat. So please pick it up or bookmark that link so that you can go ahead and consume the report and also look through it whilst the panelists are discussing more from it. And this is absolutely a very unique report. At the same time, it's very well timed given that the festive season is about to begin. So it should totally help you in your, in your media strategy and your marketing plans. Having said that, Now it's time to get some views in from our experts, who I'm eagerly waiting to introduce. I am absolutely glad and delighted that we have fellow marketers with us who also happen to be MMA members, several of them, and who are experts, to be able to give us perspective and more and throw more light on what we see in the report, that we've just sort of had a glimpse of. So with that, I'm going to open up the stage to bring on our panelists, and let me introduce each of them one by one. So let me start with the lady in the room first. So RUCHIRA JAITLY, Head of Marketing India HMD Global. Warm welcome, RUCHIRA. It's lovely to have you on the panel today.
Thanks, Monica. It's always a pleasure to come in for an MMA event. Just the sheer richness in terms of thinking, the thought, the kind of thought leaders you get together makes it really
awesome. Awesome. Glad to hear that. And next up, we have ANIL CHILLA, who's Chief Digital and Data Officer at L'Oreal India. Welcome, ANIL. I don't know how many times I've welcomed you, but welcome back. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Always glad to be at an MMA event. So look forward to, the discussion in the panel.
Fantastic. Super. So we're going to bring TUSHAR back, and we're still not going to let TUSHAR rest till we've heard more views from him. So TUSHAR, welcome back to the panel. It's nice to have you here.
Thank you.
And last but not the least, we have Vijay Iyer, who's from Amazon Advertising and is Director at Sales. Warm welcome to you, Vijay. Lovely to have you on the panel.
Thanks, Monica, and hello, everybody. Glad to be here. Looking forward to the discussion.
Excellent. So now that we've got all of you in the room, I'm super excited to start the discussion with all of you, and to really get you guys to opine more on the report that we've just seen. So, Anil, let me begin by starting with you, and maybe just getting some perspective here. As per the report, 50% consumers are likely to increase their spends this festive season, is what the report has, kind of been derived. And the data also shows that the consumption is very high when it comes to lifestyle and celebration categories. So I just want to know from you, how have consumer journeys evolved in the COVID times according to you? And how is this change reflecting in your category specifically? So, do you want to chime in there?
Sure, absolutely. I think that's a very deep question, right? So I think I'll start with a couple of data points, right? What I saw in the report was, 80% of consumer journeys, involved digital, right? So, in terms of, whether it's at a upper funnel level or a lower funnel level, right? Or of course, the middle funnel level, right? So, and a bunch of consumers, for example, 50% of them are only researching digital, right? So which means that digital, therefore, all the different media vehicles that we have within digital, therefore become extremely important from an overall consumer journey standpoint, right? So in that sense, for a brand, therefore, it becomes very important for us to engage consumers at the appropriate steps in that part of the journey, right? Having said that, I'm actually not surprised to see the 50%. I think it should be a bit higher. It may have been subdued by the fact that we've gone through a very aggressive wave 2, right? I hope there isn't a wave 3, and it remains. I hope we get to celebrate the festive season as it's meant to be, right? But yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised at all. I think it should be a bit higher in terms of the sentiment. Considering the first half of the year was quite subdued, right? But pretty much across the board, all of us have seen families impacted across the country, right? So from my perspective, in our category, right? So the beauty category is a festive occasion-led category, right? So it needless to say that it's a big opportunity for us to amp up our engagement with consumers at this point in time. Also, the experience from last year showed to us that, consumers, we had a very subdued, let's say Q2 and Q3 last year, but towards the end of Q3, we saw, signals pick up, right? Consumers being back. We heard the term revenge shopping. Thankfully, this year, you've not actually seen a significant drop, right, compared to what it was, say, last year. And variety of issues impacted, right, last year, supply chain, etc. But this year, while we've seen demand, not go down to that level, having said that, the expectation certainly is going to be that H2 is going to be big across the board, right? And with people coming out of the the wave 2 sort of impact, and hopefully if there isn't a wave 3, then I would expect that it should be good for consumers, and which means good for brands as well. So we are really looking forward to the season that's coming up, and we have sort of prepped ourselves to go all in. And this time I think we're also seeing the impact of IPL, right? So which is another big event within our digital and marketing community overall, right? So yeah, so I'll say all this combined, I see it only going up and up.
Interesting. So that's a good point of view to get. And of course, you're right. This is a smaller sample size, so the percentage can be higher, but this is a fair indication of based on primary data. So I want to just get a quick view from the audience as well on this, on how are they seeing, what are they seeing as marketer challenges for the upcoming festive season? And we're going to do this with a quick poll. So can we have the poll, please? So here's the poll up on your screen. The question here is, which are your marketing challenges for the upcoming festive season? Choices being identification of the right audience, identification of relevant consumer, media clutter, or measuring impact of spends effectively. And we'll see if we can get a view from our panelists based on what we see here as results. And we'll give it a couple of seconds for more folks to sort of share their vote. And I do see a higher skew here towards measuring impact of spends effectively, and of course, rightfully so. Fabulous. So I think with that, we're good to end the poll. And for anybody from the panel who would like to chime in here on what they see as the result, where in pecking order, we have measuring impact of spends effectively as the first challenge, followed by media clutter as the second challenge, and the other two being very close. Anybody would like to opine from the panel on the results here?
If I can just go ahead, I thought media clutter would be bigger because everybody in sundry would be investing in a big way on media at this point in time. Marketing spend efficiency and effectiveness is an ever-present challenge for marketers. So, to me, that's like a baseline. So in that sense, for me, it's not a surprise at all that it is here.
Interesting.
If I could add to
yes,
that,
RUCHIRA, of course.
Yeah,
of course.
because I think there's also, I talked about it, when we were looking at the report. And Anil, absolutely agree with you. That's something that's a baseline, but more than ever, after a quiet first half, relatively speaking, and given the clutter in festive period and the sheer number of options that are going to be presented to to marketers and to advertising partners, I think it is going to be. I would definitely have plumped for CP. In fact, I was a little disappointed I couldn't vote on it, and and when it came to 45% at the bottom, because for us the cost per sales or the ROI is going to be even more important, and I think it's because of the sheer proliferation and the number of choices, particularly on digital. And I think that's where, and we'll talk about it later, I suspect, which is about saying, how do you resolve for what's a good digital marketing plan at the end of the day? And how do you win with decoding the consumers in the right way? This is a topic, of course, that we can go on forever on. So Monika, take it away.
Fabulous. So thanks for sharing that point of view. And, we definitely need to be able to give perspective to what we're hearing from the audience. So let me move on to TUSHAR. TUSHAR, you've just taken us through all the highlights, and you did point out a data point which said 80% of the brands are looking to maintain or increase their marketing budgets for this festive season, right? So as a large media group, what, according to you, is the role digital is going to play for brands in their consumer journey? And to what extent is it going to be responsible to influence brand choice? What's your take there?
Pretty interesting. Ruchira has just given a bit of hint in her sort of comment, right? So I think we have moved over from that phase, right? So I don't think there are any question about the role of digital. Basically, the question has moved to what and how, right? So I think that's something which we need to deliberate based on the category and a sort of maturity of sort of core consumer you are targeting, and based on that, one need to sort of zero in where exactly digital can play the role in the entire consumer journey. Right? So I would say what and how is becoming a most critical question. Understanding consumer journey is becoming a sort of most critical question right now. Right? There are many interesting sort of blocks which has emerged, especially in the last 18 months. Right? If you look at the broader consumer behavior, there is an exponential jump which has happened across various formats, but especially what we have been, and MMA also we call that, right, the 3V. So video, voice, and vernacular as a block, which is becoming very interesting block. There's a second 3C, let me tell that as like a 3C. So content, commerce, and quote-unquote influencer. So that's becoming an interesting area, and there is a sort of lots of opportunities sitting in areas like a social commerce and stuff like that. So I think one need to look at overall sort of connected journey, where exactly digital is contributing within that. It can be, depending on category, it can be research online, purchase online, or maybe end-to-end consumer journey. Or what we seeing some of the category very naturally is a reverse ROPO kind of thing also, right? So consumer is walking into offline outlet, and very naturally they look at product comparison, feature comparisons, pricing, benchmarking, right? So there is a multiple data sort of being looked at while they are looking in offline environment, right? So it can be compare and consider, it can be discover and sort of consider, right? So it's a various small, it might be slightly difficult to give a single answer,
Sure.
but it's
Makes sense. Yeah.
Multiple touch point, prioritize based on your category, and look at how you can sort of touch upon your consumer in the right context.
Makes sense. I get that. So I think you're making an interesting point. I think the level of influence and the role digital will play will be different for different categories. And one will need to sort of define it based on the category and the vertical. So with that, I'm going to quickly launch one more poll just to see how our panelists can, sort of reflect on this. And maybe Vijay, I'll come to you on the results of this, right? So the next poll here, I'd like you guys to look at it and respond, where we're trying to understand, compared to the last Diwali festive season, how are you likely to focus on digital advertising, given that we're seeing a lot of impact that it's having and it's only going to have more impact? So is it going to be higher than last year, similar to last year, lower than last year? As per the report, of course, we had a huge skew to higher and similar, but let's see what the audience has to say. Interesting. So I think we already have the results here. And Vijay, given that, Amazon advertising is also, sort of monitoring the space and very actively engaged, what we see here is 76% of the audience says higher than last year, 18% says similar to last year. How would you want to validate this point?
No surprise there. I'm sure if we dig deeper into that question, there are going to be a lot more questions that advertisers will have. The intent is there. Largely what I see in the market and through this report as well is there is consumer optimism. It's palpable. We can all feel it. Now, advertisers see that as opportunity, right? Because when there's optimism, there's opportunity. I think the bridge is going to be how much of that opportunity is going to convert into real business. And a lot of what, at least what the research says, and hopefully some of what we'll discuss today will help reinforce that. So for me, it's that journey from the consumer optimism that we can all see, and the opportunity that it presents to marketers. How is that actually going to convert into business? at this point, given everything that we've gone through this year, I think that is going to be the proof of the pudding. And yeah, the signs are there. We are already seeing strong upward trends, in terms of advertiser engagement, how they're planning, the questions that they're asking us, the scale at which people want to invest. So yeah, not surprised with that, but yeah, like they say, the best is yet to come. So the proof of the pudding has to come, and it will come.
Sure. Actually, Vijay, I want to sort of, before I move to Ruchira, I want to kind of ask you another point related to what you just spoke. Today's omni-channel consumers, as the report also calls out, can be reached on connected TV, on video, and to whether it's to build awareness or for consideration and sales, even through platforms like search, programmatic, display, etc. Right? So, we are now also beginning to see marketers include e-commerce touch points in the media plans, quite actively. How do you think it is benefiting brands? And if at all you can call out an example, would love to hear one.
Sure. So there are two marketers here. So let me think about this, or let me explain this in the parallel universe, right? We were talking about food just before the session started. So my in-laws and I and my wife, whenever we go out to eat, right? And I've been married for a while, so we've had a lot of meals outside. We're sitting in a restaurant in Mumbai. They will scrutinize the entire menu, top to bottom, every single thing, right? And then my father-in-law will order the uttapam, and my mother-in-law will order the rava dosa every single time, right? Unless there is somebody who comes in and influences them saying, "Ye try karo," yeah, my wife sentees them into something else. Now, part of this, in some way, is the typical consumer on an e-commerce platform like Amazon. So if you look at statistics, and in the I don't want to make it boring by throwing in numbers, but 65% of all our searches are generic. Someone in the chat window asked, "What's product?" Right? Is it parachute oil, or is it parachute hair oil, or is it hair oil? It's usually hair oil. People know that they probably would end up buying parachute, or they may have bought parachute in the past, but they want to see what's on offer. And that is where an opportunity exists for other marketers. That's where the opportunity exists for everyone else operating in that category. So 60+% of people will start their search with a very generic term, right? And to me, that stems from the fact that there is massive selection, millions and millions of product combinations available on e-commerce. So the gateway, the ability to engage with customers at a time when their mind is quite open, right? They've not really decided. Maybe they've decided the product category. Maybe they've decided they want to buy a mobile phone, right? And they are probably in their mind skewing towards a few brands, but they've not taken a decision. And that's what they're telling you when they're starting their search. 6 out of 10 people are not typing your brand name. They're typing a generic, 4G phone or generic, mobile phone search term. So I think that presents a very unique opportunity. And that is where I feel marketers are drawn towards e-commerce. It is intent, but it is intent that is fueled by the availability of selection, which in turn is bringing out that, the aur dikhao attitude in customers, where they want to start their search with something generic, explore everything that is out there, and then take a decision so that they feel confident about what they've bought. So yeah, so I'm not sure if that was the example you were looking for, the restaurant one, but that's how I tend to look at it.
No, I think it was very well, I like the analogy. I thought you will throw in a brand example, but I'm glad you brought in a very real example, and that made it easier for the audience and me to comprehend for sure. And that makes a lot of sense. And I could hear you allude more to the full funnel marketing concept, which becomes more enabling on platforms like Amazon advertising. And I'm going to come back to you on that piece in a while. Ruchira, let me come to you. And, there's such a clear skew to mobile, fashion, electronics, and it's so visible in terms of top categories, even in the report when we were, looking at the numbers and the data, right? So coming from the category that you belong to, what role do you see digital play in a category like yours? And how are you looking at leveraging it this festive season versus last year? Do you want to allude on that?
Yeah, so this is like the motherlode question, right? Role of digital for smartphones as a category in particular.
Yes.
Jay's already smiling because he has all the stats very close to him, I'm sure. 1 in 2 smartphones are being sold online today. I mean, and that I think in a line pretty much sums up why digital is important for smartphones. Equally, the category continues to see a whole spate of new launches and will continue to do so with 5G. So you're seeing a completely new generation of technology coming in, which is going to give a different kind of impetus. So this is not going to be comparable. You know, there was one question which was, is it going to be like last year? There was no 5G entering last year. There was no affordability in going deeper and this whole demand coming in because of the pandemic and the growing digital footprint in our lives, right? In fact, it's almost like digital dominance today.
Sure.
Everyone, even for Google Pay today, needs either a face unlock or a fingerprint verification on their phones. So this is not something which is just about saying, hey, you can access your bank account. It's about saying you need biometrics to be able to make payments, right? Which means you need a smart device and not just your feature phone or any other device that you could have used, or, you know, let's say voice or any other kind of identification. So one is the technology, the pandemic, the fact that in any case, 1 and 2 were being sold well before the pandemic. The third, of course, is Festive, which is really right up there. So Festive is a season where Indians traditionally have bought, white goods. They've bought appliances. They've got various. I've heard about, PF being, the interest being paid out just before Festive. We're seeing all about, DAs and various other allowances. It's all done because as Indians, we buy at Festive, right? And Festive for us starts with Onam in the south and then goes all the way into, December in various parts of the country. So it's not just one occasion. So if you look at this part of the year, it's a major occasion where consumers are looking. And what are they looking for in my category in particular, or any other tech category? They're looking for innovation. They're looking to buy the best, the latest, etc. As an example, we launched Nokia C20 Plus, and we were surprised about the profile of people buying, right? Because this is a very mid-range budget device. We found that a lot of men are buying this as a device for their parents, which is interesting. This was meant to be a budget device. They're buying it for their parents because their parents want simpler devices. And they don't want any of the ad interruptions that come on a lot of other brands. So therefore, this brand was a brand of choice. So they're looking for innovations that matter. Now, innovation is not just 5G at one end, it's also innovations that matter. Value, of course. I mean, you're going to see a whole slew of value propositions. Convenience. People don't want to step into stores as much. And that is a tough reality, particularly for an older consumer who's not yet feeling confident in a world that's not fully vaccinated. You are buying more and more online. So if I look at all of that coming together, I mean, really, can you avoid digital? Absolutely not. And you saw that 76% of people on the poll there, talked about the fact that they're going to spend more on digital advertising.
Right.
I think the key to decision making shall be, and Tushar, the metrics he shared, we've done some work earlier, and I'm pleasantly surprised. 3 months for decision making. So it's not about digital as a way of only converting. And that was not the intent of what I said earlier, to what Anil was sharing as well. It's also about saying, how do you build up at least a middle to a bottom funnel approach? At least, full funnel can be expensive. The other one is, how do you avoid the sheer clutter and the fact that there are so many different propositions? So how do you hone in on the consumer? And more about that later. But to the importance of digital, I think it's taking on a whole new momentum, driven both by the context that we're in today as a country and as a consumer, maybe globally as well, but equally as a category. So, yeah.
Interesting. That was quite an insightful point of view, and thank you for sharing that. I'm also going to bring in a beauty point of view here. So, Anil, this is a question for you. Now that, Ruchira has built this out and, we've heard her, I want to ask you that, we also do understand beauty, is unique in its own way when it comes to marketing. And, there are many brand switchers, especially in this new age digital consumer journey, because like I think one of you mentioned, that or dikhao, right? So that just keeps happening. And in the process, you get influenced, right? So given that kind of a journey, okay, and given that he is an omnichannel or she is an omnichannel consumer, How do you tackle, such switchers, and what kind of a strategy do you typically deploy to manage it?
Sure. And that is a very deep question, and I'm sure, we can spend hours and hours discussing that. But let me try to, share a few points there, right? So one, as you rightly said, beauty as a category is a very inspiration-driven category, right? So when you're looking at, consumers, they want to be inspired. So when they buy a product, right? So it's not just about, one of the stats that we keep hearing, right, internally is, before someone buys a lipstick, she tries on at least 10 shades or 12 shades, right? So how do you create those points, touch points from a consumer perspective where they have that ability to, sort of get
Experience.
inspired and try on? So I'll say a couple of things in here, right? So we've all heard about influencers and the role of influencers in the entire ecosystem here, in the digital ecosystem. Tushar also spoke about the 3 V's. In my view, it's also the influencers, sort of working across these, sort of 3 V's, right? So what you're seeing more and more is not just that, you have the top celebrities which are driving influence. Of course, they do, but at an awareness level. But a lot of the middle and the lower funnel that we are seeing is driven by influencers who are in my mohalla, who are in my gully, who are in my city, right? Who speak the same language as I do. So vernacular, the role of voice, the video bit becomes extremely important, right? So in my view, in our category, the role of influence or the role of inspiration, therefore, becomes extremely important. So that's one of the first points, right? The second point is really about the ROPO effect. I think Tushar also spoke about the ROPO effect, right? Now, now ROPO can be played both ways, right? Which means research online or offline, and purchase offline or online, right? So in that sense, what we are seeing more and more, and the data here, the 80% data, in my view, uh, also meant that the consumer ended up purchasing on and in a lot of offline channels, because beauty by its nature is meant to be a experiential. It's a very tactile category, right, for us. So people like to try on the cream or the foundation or the mascara or the lipstick, or and so on and so forth, right? Therefore, in that sense, it becomes very tactile. But then how do you, in the current situation of the pandemic, figure out a way in which consumers are able to do that in a safe environment, right? And that's where, in my view, a beauty tech or a digital part also comes in, which is what we are sort of talking about, which is like bringing in a virtual try-on. So if you go to a maybelline.co.in, you'll actually be able to try it, but you can still purchase that product at the counter where you are standing, because we have a QR code at that counter where you can scan and experience the product, right? Without necessarily, trying to, have a disjointed journey. So the point I'm trying to make here is about O plus O. How do you integrate the online and the offline experiences in such a way that, you have one seamless experience across the entire journey? And whether it's on, for example, the Amazon platform or the other platforms as well, how do you replicate that, right? In the same way, which is, you have a virtual try on where the consumer can judge how that particular shade or color will look on her and then make that purchase. So in a sense, it's really about all the things that we've spoken about earlier. Of course, at the end of the day, the way I see it, I wouldn't advise, to the experts from other categories. What I would just say is that look at the consumer journey. Where is the consumer going? Things are changing as we speak. Consumers are consuming information from a variety of sources, figure out where they are, and see what makes the most impact, right? And the last one I leave, here from my perspective is, what is your cost of acquisition from the different channels, and what is the resultant CLTV or the lifetime value that you're deriving? And if you can get to that in such a way that your cost of acquisition is affordable, then we're all home and dry, and we can have a good Diwali and Christmas and New Year as well. So yeah, that's the only sort of piece of advice I'll share with the fellow marketers out there.
Lovely. I think that was almost like laying out a robust strategy for the marketers. And that was really well articulated. And I couldn't agree more that L'Oreal has made, really, really big strides when it comes to beauty tech and done a whole lot of innovative stuff. And I think that's also what Ruchira was talking about, that how important technology is becoming today when it comes to marketing, on digital platforms. So couldn't agree more. And thank you for sharing. Tushar, I want to quickly, in the interest of time, I want to cover one or two more points with all of you before we move to the Q&A. So Tushar, we worked together on the report with Amazon, and we've of course been able to get a view on how complex and non-linear the consumer journey is, and therefore how important the role of digital has now become. Right, where there is this data point which says, which we I think also covered briefly earlier, about 80% consumer journeys will be digitally influenced one way or the other, right? Whether it is through the influencer route or the other platform route. So, what, according to you, is the role of e-commerce as a touch point for engaging consumers during this festive season, and how do you think it can most effectively be achieved? I think you're on mute, Tushar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you look at a broader sort of digital component, I think the three things which stands out as a gateway, right? So one is the commerce and commerce platform. Second is discovery platform like search, and third is basically social media and influencer, right? So they are the three pillars where consumer making entry and into digital and starting that discovery journey. And commerce has become, integral part of that mix over a period of time. And especially if you look at in the last 18 months, there is a sort of exponential growth which has happened, and happened in a two-way. One is basically the number of category sort of got added into e-com is also expanded, right? So the basket has become bigger and sort of wider. The second thing which has happened is the frequency of which they started visiting the commerce platform has also changed, right? And to quite some extent, this platform has also played a role. So the e-com platform, what used to be a electronic driven, is now a much more wider spectrum, right? And many of them is very heavy on categories like a grocery, which is high frequency activity. And add to that, many of these are moving into more and more sort of term, which is much in a vogue right now, is a super app kind of structure, right? So they are ensuring that consumer remains within that environment. There is a multiple activity possible within that, and it's fulfills a large part of the what consumer needs. So it's becoming an important destination, not only commerce, but as sort of Vijay and some of you highlighted, the entire journey. So it has got a sort of component which can address the sort of audience discovery out of a funnel activity. It has got compare and consider kind of feature where you are doing the product comparison and stuff like that. And finally, of course, the transactions and stuff like that, right? So there are sort of opportunity getting stacked across the entire journey in a way. So that's a sort of a broader view which is possible. And add to that, basically, it gives a bit of a full funnel transparency in terms of measurement, right? And I think as a group and audience also highlighted the measurement as one of the key criteria. So it's a bit of ticks on that those parameters also. So I think it's going to heighten from that perspective, full funnel approach, ability to fulfill and provide intent audience at a sort of right moment, right? So I think all these are sort of benefit which you're going to see there. Add to what Ruchira has mentioned is a festival as a sort of habit, right? And then again, buying around festival is pretty ingrained in our Indian consumer mind. And e-com platform has also taken it to next level by putting a marketing mites around that entire thing, right? So it's a in a way a calendar event where many consumers are looking forward, either be it in terms of a sale or a promotion which is going to come and transact around that. So that's also a sort of important sort of marketing event which got created around this period. So And all in all this component makes it pretty interesting proposition.
Absolutely. And I think that's again very well captured. I know you've seen through the digital journey for like over 2 decades. So, I think you can totally see how the evolution has really happened. And you did allude to full funnel marketing. And that's where I'm going to bring Vijay in because I think he can totally elaborate more in depth. To just bring alive that point, which I think in today's context is super valuable. So Vijay, I just want to understand from you that how, according to you, and I'm sure everyone in the audience would want to know too, how, according to you, can brands measure the effectiveness of intent touch points in the media plan, and what, according to you, are the key advantages when you include intent touch points like e-commerce platforms in a full funnel plan? How would you respond to that?
Sure, I'm going to simplify this a little bit, right? Everybody is looking to do business. I mean, there is no running away from the fact that at the end of the day, it is the business that's paying for this party, whether it is a publisher or it is a marketer or it's an agency. We are all, if we are relevant and useful to the customer will buy, and then the ball starts rolling. So let's look at it for what it is. So the question for me is, hey, how do I use this channel, e-commerce, which seems to have strong intent signals? Do we have strong intent signals? Yeah, we do, right? We know, for example, somebody's looking for a certain product or a certain brand. You have the ability to talk to the customer at that point, right? Over a period of time, depending on what the customer's buying behavior, purchase patterns, purchase values are, you can again, look at those cohorts and you can target customers. So I think the intent part, because we are all e-commerce customers, and I'm sure all of us buy online, is for me a simpler thing. Is there intent available? Yes. And can that intent be put to good use? Yes, it can. But I think the larger point is, how do I look at impact, right? And that's where I want to throw in possibly a controversial point, right? That largely you will see, marketers saying, hey, e-commerce is equal to sales. I agree. But then as Tushar and I discussed, I think a few months back, right? If you're saying e-commerce equal to sales, but you're not putting a time dimension to that, you're probably wrong. E-commerce, any platform, is equal to sales. The only distinction in e-commerce is that e-commerce is also going to give you some output in the form of sales or in the form of your SKUs moving, secondary, primary, here and now. But you're also seeding. You also have to seed. I think someone in the panel called out that there is a long gestation. People research for a certain span of time, right? Now, let's take Diwali, right? I think 250 million sessions is what roughly will happen on Amazon, right? Now, this is going to mean a lot of sales. It's going to mean a lot of volume and a lot of really good stuff for marketers. So that would essentially mean that if you did a great job with Amazon search, you will you'll get whatever you wanted to achieve in the festival season. And that is where, for the audience, the point I want to make is that's not going to be enough. If you're not using a high amplification event like this or a high confluence of customer engagement like this to also seed your brand, to also seed your SKUs, right? And using intent for that, because intent does not always mean purchase in the short term. Intent could mean interest. Intent could mean I'm looking, but I can't afford it right now. I mean, the number of people who look at high-end mobile phones is pretty interesting, but we all know that not everybody is going to end up buying them, right? So along with optimizing for business, ROAS, as it is famously known now, I think it is very, very important to also look at this event and use the same intent, use the same ability to leverage intent to seed what is going to be your baseline for next year. How many people are going to be looking for you next year? Are your CTRs going to improve? Or something even more fundamental? Are the number of people who are looking for your brand or your set of products, is that number going to go up? The number of people organically coming to your product pages because they look for you, is that going to go up? Those are strong indicators that you've planted the right seeds and they're growing into the right seeds. Otherwise, it's literally like digging a well every time and looking for water. Eventually, it's going to run out because everybody else is digging wells too. So that's broadly what I feel, that the intent, the ability to target audiences using intent information is not only restricted to sales. It's also about seeding for the future. It's also about letting letting customers know what your product lines are, what the benefits are,
Right.
through your product pages, through your communication, possibly through videos.
Right.
So yeah, that's
Right. No, that totally makes sense, and that sort of really gives a very comprehensive perspective on how you look at intent platforms and how you leverage intent platforms, because it's not as literal as one perceptually has normally looked at it and the way the one has used it. But of course, now marketers are learning it and are benefiting. Now, I'm going to get one last point, addressed with Ruchira, and then we'll open it up for a quick Q&A. And Ruchira, I'm actually very, very intrigued to learn more about this from you, because there is a similar philosophy which MMA also has, which I will conclude once you've addressed this for us. So, you've, Ruchira, shared a very interesting perspective with us in the report, and I'm trying to sort of read it more or less in verbatim. You've said the role of digital in resolving that famous messy middle is magnified for greater efficiency, attempting to maximize return after a disappointing first half. Yeah. You've really articulated the concept of messy middle in a very appropriate and relevant way in context of the report. I want you to tell us and the audience a little more about how you define the messy middle and what role do you think they really play?
Yeah. So first of all, I think you've heard a lot from the other panelists.
Yes.
And I, when I was listening to Vijay, to Anil, to Tushar, you've heard from them already about how the decision-making journey is one that can go on for 3 months. Our data suggested 3 months, right? Timing is very important with festival, with promotions, with offers, etc. Or it's a time of year when you buy, when you invest in certain things. And well, we all know the price of gold, so why not buy an appliance instead, kind of a phenomenon. I think equally research for products online. So the learning for us has been on the consumer decision journey. It is forget linear, forget complicated, forget multiple sources of information. There is no clear logic today, other than the fact that there will be a lot of consumption of content, which is whether it's video vernacular, which is absolutely huge. Voice, to some extent, we're seeing podcasts pick up as well, but reviews, products, influencers. So there's a huge amount of data consumption that's happening. And at some point, that resolves itself into making that decision. And we saw the data, right? I was taking notes when that data was being shared, which was, I think there was a large number of 60% plus who not decided on their brand or the product. Now that tells you about how messy that middle really is, alliterating on it a bit.
Right.
Now, I think we've worked, in fact, with Vijay's teams in Amazon, really to look at saying, how do we resolve for that, right? And that was the question you had, I think. On Nokia, we have a very clear philosophy that says, we believe in the Nokia tribes. These are people who believe in a similar philosophy globally. And therefore, that's a philosophical alignment with the values of the brand, right? And we do it by picking up signals on the way they consume, what's the kind of media they look at, and looking and correlating that to their interest in the brand. But equally, we're working with teams, let's say on Amazon, to look not just at in-market audiences that are searching and therefore have intent, but go further and beyond that. And Tushar talked about the various groups. So, I mean, honestly, I think I'm just recapping what a lot of these guys have said, which is, whether it's a price band, whether it is a cohort that comes from culture, codes, etc. The question is, and I'm sure Anil is aware of this, how do you use all of that data to come with meaningful insights and then target basis that? Because that's a great way to cut that whole journey of decision-making to say, you're looking for this. This is the kind of the interest you have. Now, let me give you an example. This season, we're going to have one of the largest range of devices on smart, which started 5,500. We launched that yesterday, going all the way up to 45,000 plus, technically a multiplier of 10x, right? If that is the case, that is a range that you can't go out and say, I have to build Nokia brand awareness anymore, which would have been maybe the route, 10 years ago even. So therefore, how do you cut that journey short? By looking at the right in market with the right kind of culture cohorts, with the right kind of price band. Then look at the storytelling. I took a peek sneak at the Q&A, and someone actually asked about the role of storytelling versus the role of offers.
Yeah.
If I were to look at a category like mine, where people are looking for innovation and of course value and convenience, and I put it in that order very deliberately, I don't think people are coming in to say, give me the cheapest phone. To say, this is my phone, these are my needs, this is the device I need for my needs. Now tell me, is that a nice value proposition? If not, and if I think that your storytelling convinces me, for example, the Nokia XR20, which we launched globally, which is quite simply the most rugged device, right? That consumer is not going to worry about it not being maybe the cheapest phone in the market, but is going to look at kind of functional deliverable. So there is a role of storytelling and then value. And yes, at festive season, as much as marketers want to run away from it, value does play an important role at that absolute bottom end. And lots of wry smiles across the whole panel. But I think we overestimate value. I think we overestimate value when we don't have the right kind of proposition. Speaking as a consumer for L'Oreal, if there isn't that right kind of shade, color, whatever proposition, I'm not going to buy it regardless of how many, whatever gimmicks we run. And therefore the role of storytelling with influencers and reviewers. And they have become by the way, I think they are emerging as a very strong reason why the content to commerce connection is one that is becoming larger and larger. And that I think is something interesting, which I don't know enough about yet. We're still seeing it play out. That being said, I suspect all of us are going to see a lot of things play out this festive season. There's a lot to learn. So there is no real Bible that you can just hand out, at least not for me. And I'd love to hear from everyone else. I probably exceeded the time that you wanted the quick bite on, but this is fascinating. I could...
No,
yeah,
I'm glad because you actually covered one of the questions as well, and we were anyways going to jump into the questions. So I'm glad you covered that piece, and I'm glad you touched upon the concept of importance of content for commerce, which I couldn't agree more. And yes, it's an absolutely important space to get right. So like we know, we do have maybe we'll just probably take another 5 minutes to try and address maybe one or two questions before we close. Having said that, we will try and have the other questions addressed from our panelists. So for those of you who are asking all these questions, we may not be able to take up several of them due to time, but we'll try and get back to you offline. Having said that, I also am going to be conscious about the kind of questions I'm going to take to the panelists, because in all fairness, I'd rather give you the questions which are relevant to your category, because there are many questions here on footwear, furniture, etc., which I don't think I'd like to sort of right now pick up with you. But let me pick maybe just one or two quick questions. So I would request this to be brief, but Tushar, starting with you, tell me the rapid growth of e-commerce platforms in terms of visitors and shoppers. If you had to give a few tips on how marketers can better integrate e-commerce platforms in media plans, what would you call out?
If you're selling on the marketplace, then the easy starting point, of course, is to look at a discovery platform or a search. So that can give you sort of immediate boost, and then you can sort of learn and expand your sort of advertising option within the platform. So start with the search first.
Makes sense. Anil, a quick one for you. We've seen L'Oreal being one of the leaders in digital advertising in the beauty sector. Any tips on how you would drive a balance between awareness and performance? I think that's phenomenal, and especially during festive season. That's the question.
Yeah, I think there isn't it's a one size fits all. Unfortunately, it really depends on the brand and the objective. Of course, a big part of the objective will be driving sales during the festive season. So it needs to be, lower funnel, of course, middle and lower funnel led. But then having said that, if the brand is launching something, or if there is if it's a new brand, then obviously, awareness building also is very important, because the funnel, it's an inverted pyramid, right? So you want to build the top of that inverted pyramid to make sure, or the bottom, whichever way you look at it, to make sure you have enough consumers converting at the end of the day, right? So I'll basically say that, you have to look at all. Brand equity and sales, both are important. And it depends on the brand and the category and the product and their objectives in terms of what's to be driven.
Got it. And this is going to be my last question in the interest of time. And Vijay, I'm going to ask you to address this for us. So Priyanka from AFL, who's the marketing head, wants to know that during these events, I'm assuming she's referring to festive events, most consumers are going to look at or expect discounts. If a brand has a new range or products coming in at a sweet price point, what is the right way to promote it? And is this the right time to push it?
Sure. So, to give some comfort, there are several brands that, as a matter of policy, do not discount their top products even during the festive season. And the idea is to then use formats that would promote your narrative, use larger ad formats that would promote your narrative or that would promote storytelling. Yeah, I mean, the team can help you. I don't know the specifics here to give a very specific answer, but yeah, it is not strange, or it is not at all a deviation for a brand that is already priced very competitively. If it's a well-known brand and you don't see a reason to discount, then don't. Just then focus on the storytelling.
Makes sense. Makes sense. And I'm glad we were able to cover this question, because I know it's an important one in the current context with festive season nearing. So with that, I think the report has got so much richer with this discussion. And all of you have really managed to bring a lot of perspective, which only comes from experience. Hence, I always tell all my attendees that however good a report is, it's extremely important that wisdom and experiences is sort of blended or borrowed for it, because only then it becomes so much more enriched, right? So I'm hoping that with this conversation, the report has more meaning, more perspective to our audience. So I do want to, on that note, say a big thank you to all of you for sharing your insights, for participating, and giving us your valuable time. This industry resource that we are launching, and the link has been shared in the chat window, is definitely going to be very useful for our attendees and for all of you at large. I do want to make a special mention for GroupM and Amazon Advertising in helping co-author this. We've had a really, really wonderful time working together on this, and we do think this is going to add value. So don't forget to download your copy. And I don't think I have the time to summarize, but I think all of us have covered most of the points. So I'm going to, with that, bring the session to a close. And I'm hoping to see everybody again soon. I want to remind all of you who are attending the webinar to make sure that you register for the upcoming event, or MMA event, which is the Smarties India, which is our 10th edition, with a bunch of new initiatives being unveiled at it. So do ensure that you register by scanning the QR code that you see on your screen. And till we meet again, do follow MMA for further updates and for more context and nuggets on the report as well. The social media handles can be visited through the QR code, which you see again on the screen. So I hope you enjoyed the session as much as I did conducting it. Thank you so much, and have a lovely evening ahead.